Hello and welcome back to Hearthstone. And well, we had a little bit of a long break in the first week, and this time, no, we're speeding things up. We're making sure that Hearthstone stays hot, because waiting is not what everybody wants to do. And well, you don't have to wait for the matchup to come, because we're getting it underway as soon as possible. Obviously, still next to me is Mick.
As always, man. I feel like y'all gonna be hearing a lot of that tonight, but you know, it is what it is, dog.
He's like a cockroach tonight, just doesn't want to go whatsoever.
And I mean, I wasn't really thinking much of a cockroach, but you know, we all have our own analogies, so I'll roll with it.
Yeah, no, I just don't even think of them as bad animals, just incredibly resilient. So it's more of a compliment than an insult. But obviously, to each their own, to each their own. If you want to take it as an insult, be my guest. The Hearthstone. Yes, that's what we're here for, not an insult battle or whatever going back and forth. It's, I think we're in the championship bracket this time. A little bit less expecting of mistakes at that point.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I gotta say, after what the things I've seen these past couple weeks, that's always up for debate. You know, with these guys, it's always a wild card, and that's my favorite thing about watching all these guys in the championship bracket playing, is that you never really know what they're going to bring to the table. Because I mean, you and I really just discussed it a second ago. Looking at some of these decks, I mean, I really can't tell what's going on, but even as an experienced player who's been playing for about 5 years, I mean, looking at one of these decks, I'm just very confused. And if we get around to it, I'd love to see it succeed by some chance.
And we don't know the bans as of right now, but the deck we just talked about, I do think we're going to get a chance to see it purely because it's so out there. I can't imagine that it will get banned. I'm more thinking of the Enraged Warrior being banned, potentially the Warlock deck being banned, as well as Priests. It's just a little bit of a Highlander. I honestly, I don't really know what's going on the side of Aidan here. It's a little bit hard to see. Wubba there has a little bit more of a clear-cut deck list.
Yeah, I completely agree. When you run the likes of a Highlander, Hunter, a Pure Paladin, a Res Priest, and a Token Druid, I mean, albeit they're all super annoying decks to deal with in ladder, but I mean, for the situation you're in, it's time to bust out those cards. So, you know, beforehand, though, when it comes down and when we're looking at Aidan's deck, I mean, I want to go ahead and specifically mention this Druid deck, talking about I would love to have a talk with this man later and figure out what he's going for. But when you're looking at everything else, I completely agree with you in the fact that that's probably not going to be touched in regards of when it comes to bans, because if I feel like, in a sense, I don't know how to play it with how long I've been playing the game, I'm usually going to assume my opponent doesn't either, and they're just throwing something in the wind right there. But everything else here is lining up to seem pretty run-of-the-mill. But besides possibly the Enraged Warrior, which you mentioned, because, I mean, I've seen it succeed before. I've seen Aidan run this before and have success with it, surprisingly enough. And it seems just a little bit too situational. So I feel like that's not going to be touched all that much.
I mean, you absolutely hate it, aggro decks, and that is what Enraged Warrior is pretty decent against. I feel like they have the favorable matchup against decks who just want to go for the throat on the side of the warrior, and then they can just throw down taunts and buff them up and everything like that with the Lord Barov and all those kinds of things. We don't really have a aggro deck, maybe the Druid, the Token Druid, but apart from that, I don't know. I really hope he can lead by example with the odd druid. Let's just call it an odd druid. I have no clue, even though that goes way back to when odd and even decks were still a thing. I just remember that as well. Oh, it's going to be
PTSD, man. Yes, I am spectating Wubba right now.
Yes.
So we do have Priest against Hunter going on right now. This is the ban game, so this is what we won't be seeing. So honestly, really good picks on both behalves right here. I really love the fact that Aidan decided, okay, I need to get this Priest out of the way. because I'm going to tell you right now, if you've never played Hearthstone before, Priest is a plague. And whenever you face the likes of a Res Priest, it's even worse, because you feel completely pointless for the whole game trying to deal with these threats, which will constantly be sticking to the board. And it feels like with every single one of them having Reborn, you can never actually get rid of them. But also on the flip side, you know, dealing with this Hunter, I mean, that's also a really good call, because I mean, Hunter, it's Hunter, dude. It's aggro, it's the whole meta, it's everything that class is built around. And if you can get that out of the way, I mean, I feel like Wove's got the same exact mindset as I do when it comes down to that.
Yeah, just wants to get it out of the way. Well, before we hop into the match, it's always nice to see where the players are standing at and the importance of this match. Well, let me tell you, it's pretty important once again, as Aidan is currently also 2-2, and Wub is 1-3. So if he can get a win against Aidan here today, he will equalize that record and basically make him his direct competitor, and then he has the head-to-head advantage. So it's a relatively important day for Wub to be trying to take home that win, as he starts with the Paladin here.
Yeah, and a really interesting play with the Paladin against this whole kind of free Warlock that they're aiming for, with the fact that Paladin's going to be developing a lot of early threats. He's going to throw down the McGurgle pretty early, which is actually super beneficial for Wub's case, because the earlier you get that thing off the board, the more likely you're going to be drawing that prime in those earlier stages. And also having a first day of school is also super influential, because if you can get that down, throw enough threats out for the low cost of 0 mana, adding up to 2 if you decide to get all those minions down, and as we saw last game, possibly getting a Gibberling and just steamrolling with that. Overall, I mean, there's huge potential behind it. So that's going to be drawing out a little bit of Warlock's threats and board clears here, if Wub can get in that situation where he's forcing him into scenarios where he has to deal with that.
He does need to be able to force them in said situations as well, otherwise you can have everything that you want, you can have everything that your heart desires, but it doesn't end up mattering. As the quest for the Warlock, oh, that's an interesting one. That's an interesting one for sure. Wanting to just get a little draw in there, and well, it is Warlock. It always wants to end up drawing.
Yeah, and I gotta say, I'm really intrigued at the fact that Wub wanted to go ahead and throw down this Blackjack Stunner, because Paladin, as much as we don't usually see it, Paladin actually does have secrets in his pool. They may not be in the deck, but when you're running a Light Forge, you never know what you're really going to be dealt when it comes to those. They're not going to play into your deck archetype. They're not going to say, okay, this is looking like a Paladin, this is looking like a pure Paladin. Let me go ahead and give you a bunch of Librams. It's very randomized, and there's so many archetypes to Paladin that you'll most likely get a lot of things that won't be beneficial to you. So the likelihood of keeping that Stunner and being able to get it off later could have been a huge influence, but I could understand from a stat point of view, getting that 1-2 down and forcing both of those armor vendors to trade into it is a relatively positive trade overall. But just thinking of what kind of potential he could have had in the late game if he had the chance to get the actual status effect off with it, I mean, that could have been insane.
That could have been, well, we said it earlier. We do see a little bit of, not necessarily weird plays, but not necessarily ideal plays come out. Also in the champions bracket, which, well, it kind of makes sense. It's Hearthstone. It's a game of many opportunities, many possibilities, and you all need to calculate them so incredibly quickly. If you get punished, you're going to be calculating a little bit different. As I don't really see a lot of pressure on the board coming out of Wub. He's taking a little bit of a slow approach, and I don't know. I think the late game favors Aidan here.
Yeah, I'm on the same page with that. Whenever you really break it down, Aidan's already at 10 out of 20 for his quest, which is the biggest part of this Warlock deck. That's what it's so centralized around. It's getting those, more expensive cards later on for the price of nothing. So overall, if Wub doesn't find a way to clear both of these minions out right now, I mean, he's not looking too good. And, speaking on mistakes, kind of interesting to see that he went ahead and wasted the Divine Shield, essentially, the second one that you could get from those Goody 2 shields, he could have easily traded that into the Lucky Soul Hoarder, gotten the 4 damage off, given it that buff, and made it a 5/3 with the Divine Shield, able to trade into that dragon next turn, essentially. But overall, the fact he wanted to get that done right up front and get those boards off, I mean, I understand where he's coming from, but I mean, Warlock usually isn't very board central, if you get what I'm saying. They're not very good about making those big threats, getting a huge board down until that quest comes out.
And we did see that in the likes of Dark Skies as well, that they're more focused on wanting to clear it out and having the perfection to do so. I've considered not going to do too much except remove Divine Shields, which is basically infinite damage, or an infinite damage reductor. Doesn't really have that though. He's able to clear everything out. Aidan, he's managing to generate a lot of health. He's at 25 health going into the later stage of the game, where we kind of see what
it is, man,
trying to clear it out.
There it is, the secret. If he still had that stunner, man, he could have put that Twilight Drake in there. And let me tell you right now, a 6 mana cost Twilight Drake is not worth it, my guys. So overall, I mean, he could have gotten a bunch of value out of that, but getting it early just for the likes of 2 1/4s, I mean, that's something you got to be thinking about. You got to be setting up for that later game, especially when you're playing as a pure paladin. That's where you usually excel, is in those late games after you start finding these minions that can really stick and start fighting on your behalf, especially with the likes of a Light Forge on the board, being a 7/7 that just gave you a full hand essentially, and now having a Tyrion as well. There's so much to work with in Wubb's case now, and the fact he sat there and felt pressure in those earlier rounds to dump so much resources is really looking like it's going to come back to bite him.
He does have the Tyrion, so he's able to create more board pressure. The McGurgle Prime comes into the hand. Hello there. That is a way to create some tempo, so to create some pressure, to really bring up the board. Aidan still has Dark Skies, but he just used 2 big clears. Still no decision to actually bring it out, which, oh yeah, playing around the Twisting Nether. It's smart play by Wubb.
Yeah, and I feel like at this point in the game, that's how he exactly is wanting to set himself up, because not only when it comes to Tyrion, he's not just looking at the Divine Shield. He's not just looking at that taunt and those stats on the board to protect himself. He's setting himself up for some pretty hefty damage to buff out that heal that Warlock just got, because when you get the likes of a 5/3 sword, I mean, that's, once Tyrion goes down, you have 15 extra damage from him purely off the weapon that you get. And that's so much with him to work with, especially when you get that repentance onto the likes of a strong man. I mean, goodness, that's value at the wazoo right there.
Value, you always love seeing it in Hearthstone. If anybody can create value, that is perfect. As he might just be going face here, Wubb could just decide to kind of run Aidan down, and indeed that is what he decides to go for, putting 11 damage on the face, cutting him down to that beautiful little 10 mark with that McGurgle Prime still on the board, or in the hand rather. This is actually looking good for Wubb now.
Yeah, I mean, even having those heals as well, he has plenty of ways to put himself back in the game. If he by any chance gets his board cleared, he's always going to have a threat of some kind, and he's got this set up perfectly, you know, founded by that Tyrion solely, I feel. Because, I mean, once he clears off that True Silver that he has equipped right now, he's just going to either get the 4 damage off and destroy it and then get a 5/3 weapon, or regardless if that doesn't happen, he's got a 5/3 weapon to sit there and throw on the face. So, I mean, we're going to see it right now with Warlock only having 8 health to deal with overall. I mean, it's looking pretty good, especially with the McGurgle Prime. If you can find a way to get some kind of charge off of that, I mean, I know the likelihood isn't all that great, but it's still something, and a pretty easy way to set this up for an easy dub by Wubb.
Easy dub by Wub. He still has to get there. He has the weapon, the 6 mana or 6 health ton being on the board. It's going to be putting up a little bit of a blockade, not able to get through. But at least he's able to generate rushes relatively, or a little bit easier. There are at least 2 Murlocs that I can think of right away that have rush and be able to gun that 6/6 down. He opts to go for the long game and wanting to create even more board pressure and kind of put Aidan in a position where he's not able to really get anything going, as he continuously has to deal with that board pressure. Smart from Wub as well that he doesn't go all out. He doesn't really bang everything on the board and trying to basically say, hey, twisting nether me and yeah, this is GG for me. No, he builds it up periodically.
Yeah, and I think especially when you're playing the likes of it, Wub is always considering keeping that McGurgle for the most part, because when you know that Aidan has 2 cascading disasters somewhere in his deck or in his hand, that's constantly going to be in the back of your mind, because as we see right here, that alone is just going to clear out these 2 minions. And this is where Warlock just starts to steamroll, because he's already gotten a lot of those corrupting down. He's gotten Ticketus now, so he's got 5 cards removed out of your deck. I mean, that just messes up a lot of synergy. It messes with your whole setup and everything you've tried to place down over the course of the game. Speaking of placing things down, I mean, that 4/5 Circus Amalgam is going to be great for Wub overall, but once you sit there and destroy that somehow or find a way to deal with it, he's got a lot of damage to deal with when it comes to Aidan, what he's got to throw down.
And he has 2 twisting nethers in his hand to deal with a lot of board pressure coming in, and not being able to break through that taunt, not having a rush minion come out and to take down that 6/6, or at least to put a dent into it, might just cost him. He's not able to use his weapons for the past 2 turns, which obviously would have been lethal at this point. And Aidan, he's managed to hold on to that 8 health very nicely. We'll try and find a way to hold on to that taunt, I'm sure, because as soon as you're twisting nether, that's just 5 damage you get to your own face as well. He wants to hold on desperately, which he can with twisting nether strongman.
Yeah, and that's probably exactly the only play he's looking for right now, because twisting nether, that's his one escape card right there. He has another one laid out for him at some point, but that's not exactly what he needs, because Paladin, he can throw down another threat, buff it up, and put himself in a just as good situation as he was sitting at a second ago. So having another Libram of Hope in hand right now, that's going to be a huge advocate for that, as well as having a Goody 2 shields, an air raid. He has plenty of resources in hand generated from that Light Forge earlier, and just giving him so much to work with, especially with air raid being a twin spell. I mean, overall, he's just got so much taunts right now, and he's just playing this, as you said, for a long game, trying to elaborate as long as possible. But when you're dealing with the likes of a Warlock, you've already popped a Ticketus on you. You know he's going to have a Yasharaj in hand, or in deck at least, trying to get those cascading disasters he just popped both of, getting a second copy of those for free, getting 2 more, plus another Ticketus. It doesn't look good at this point, because that's another 5 cards just burned right out of your deck. And Warlock, this is his exact win condition when it comes to that, because of how quickly he burns his card from his hero power. That's how he sets it up, because he may only be drawing 3 or 4 cards for free, but if he can make you draw 10 of them where you can't use them, I mean, that's a much better value.
And the Lady Liadrin is still in the deck. Might not just be for long if the Ticketus does end up coming out. And indeed it does come out, so we're probably going to see, it's a 50-50 whether that goes or whether it stays. Oh, and it does go. That might just be game in the high abyss as well. This is game over for Wub. The board is massive that he's currently looking up against. No way to deal with it whatsoever. Getting 1 clear in there and a little bit of taunt divine shield action. But you basically know this is over at this point.
Yeah, I mean, there's only so much you can do at this point. You sat there, you know you have a Libram of Hope in hand, but you don't have a Lady Liadrin. You don't have the discounts to make it easier for you to put him back on the board and heal yourself up for an infinite amount of healing. And when you're robbed of those resources because they just get swiped out of your deck, I mean, you have nothing left at that point. And this man's got 3 cards in a dream to hold on to essentially at this time.
Yeah, goodbye. Goodbye. That's going to be lethal. The massive buff being swapped right back into your hand. And that is... actually, is that going to be GG? Indeed it is. 1 over lethal. Aidan manages to take it home with a double ticketus, completely demolishing all cards of Wub. And then Wub, he was in a good position. This also has been a little bit of a roller coaster game, hasn't it?
Yeah, and that's what I love about these longer matchups. It really shows, it allows the draws to shine a little bit more. It allows them to have that spotlight, these top decks to really be influential compared to your opening hand, and allows these players to show what they're capable of when it comes to their decision-making process. We see plenty of mistakes. We've seen plenty of good plays as well. And that's what I love about these longer drawn-out matchups, is you get to highlight those. You get to see what these players are capable of, instead of just saying, thank you, RNGesus. I got the perfect cards in my hand. Turn 1. I can end this quickly. So those are the exact kind of matchups I was looking for, and that's why I'm kind of, disappointed Priest got out of the pool. But I mean, this Paladin versus Warrior matchup, I feel like this is going to be interesting enough as it is, with Paladin having so many heals and Warrior being such a bully. It really just comes down to how quickly Wub can find a way to put himself back in the game.
I think relatively quickly. The Paladin has a lot of late game threats, a lot of late game opportunities, whereas the Enraged Warrior is kind of stronger against the early game. He does have a Gramage to finish it off, or potentially finish it off. This is, well, this might just go a little bit shorter than we would like. Then again, it all depends on the draws.
Yeah, and I feel like when you really break down the draws right now, Wub's looking really good having those mid-game taunts. So, I mean, he can get bullied, he can get pressured, he can get damage on himself in those early stages of the game, but he has a lot to deal with in those mid stages to buy himself some time to pull those Librams. He has the cards to put down to discount those Librams. I mean, these are just solid draws as long as he gets the right ones coming up next, because he has a really good setup. He just needs the cards to actually execute with those setups.
And that is always the start. That's always the start, having a good cards in your hand. Otherwise, I mean, they're not going to put bad cards in their deck whatsoever. In the Inner Rage, look at to buff up. Oh, okay, the Wormhole getting buffed up massively, and the face damage has already begun. Oh my word, what a board to have on turn number 4.
That's rough. That is rough. Having 2 6/8s to deal with on turn 4, man. Goodness gracious. Okay, you know what? You've convinced me, Aidan. I wasn't a big fan of this at first, but that's impressive.
The Enraged Warrior coming in absolutely massive, but this is kind of having a perfect hand to deal with it here, and put on such a massive board so early on. Well, but he does have those mid-range taunts that he can kind of pump out. They only last that long because 2 6/8s, they're not going to die by a 4/6. They eat that for breakfast almost. Aidan is in such a strong position already.
But when you really look at the capability of Pure Paladin and the future draws that could possibly come in his favor, he does have ways to deal with this. So, I mean, you can never count it out, because of, I mean, there's a reason Pure Paladin has dominated the meta for so long. There's been so much integration for it, so much reinforcement from Blizzard alone to sit there and keep that meta alive, that when you look at the likes of a Light Force, you do have ways to get heals up. But with the rest of that hand, it really comes down to, if that taunt could have stuck, or just anything really to keep it living, that would have been great. Which, I mean, Wub is going to find a way to clear one of those 6/8s and possibly set it up for next turn to get rid of the next one. But we got to see how these bombs roll out for Aidan's side, and where exactly they're going to allocate that damage, and see if, this other 6/8 is going to be able to take care of that.
Yeah, that's 6/8. I mean, with the draw coming in of Cutting Class and drawing another one, and the Inner Rage being drawn, that you might just say, hey, we're going face, baby. We're going to make this a face race, as this is, with the Inner Rage, 13 damage, so putting your opponent on 5 health, and indeed that is what he's going to do at the same time. Putting his opponent down to 5. Yes, you might have a 13-11 on the board. As soon as you can't make it a taunt, you're still in a bad position.
Oh, so close yet so far. I see him just eyeing that labor of hope right now. And he just, it's so close, but yet so far for the man. Because, I mean, that's exactly what you would want in this situation, to sit there and get an 8-8 on board, heal yourself for 9 health. I mean, that's got to be so nice. But, I mean, he just doesn't get the chance. And I feel like this is where he's going to probably put all his chips in and call it a day, because, I mean, you can trade that 6-8 to that 4-6 so easily. And, yeah, there's just not enough to slow this warrior down.
Yeah, it got off to an absolute drag race, and then, well, you might be a turtle, you might be taking it slow and steady, but if you're up against a drag racer, it doesn't really matter that much at that point. The warrior being incredibly aggressive, coming out on top early on. Turn 6 is what we saw. It's quick games. Yeah. We have roller coasters. We also have a ski ride downhill, which takes about 3 seconds. We see it all, and now we see the token druid obviously last coming out of Aidan.
Yeah, and this is exactly where Wub is hoping that the tides can turn in his favor. Because, I mean, as we've seen at Druid, there can be times where you have absolutely abysmal hands and not much to deal with. But we also saw that you can turn the game around within 2 turns alone. And, you know, I hate to say it on Wub's behalf, but it ain't looking pretty going forward, because this guy, he's got to deal with one of these toughest decks in the meta, one of the most annoying to deal with overall. And he hasn't had much luck with this pure paladin so far. So maybe he's, you know, holding on to that whole 3rd time's the charm kind of mentality. But, you know, if he doesn't end up pulling this out, he's going to be pretty annoyed he didn't get to play with all of his decks today.
And I must correct my mistake directly as well. This is not the token druid. This is the odd druid coming out of Aidan. The druid, we didn't really know what was going on. Yeah, no, I saw the druid on the other side looking at the deck list. I always get them confused. I see druid, I think, oh, that's the one they're playing with. But no, this is the weird druid coming out. So we're gonna see that into play, how it actually comes into fruition, how Aidan capitalizes on the cards that he's able to get, that he's able to generate. Now, yeah, he has a choice in choosing actually for Power of the World, creating a little bit of tempo, summoning the 3/2 Panther.
Wow. Okay. So this is gonna be weird. Let's get weird, man. This is gonna be fun to watch, because I'm happy we got to a point where we can actually see this in that case, because, I mean, not too many cards exactly stand out for this deck. I mean, I can read it off for you right here. I'm not going to go into every single card, obviously, but just looking what's laid out, you see a runic carvings and arbor up. I mean, that's like token druid in a sense. But yet you also see the likes of a Centurion Ward, a Ysera Unleashed. You see these spells, once again, lunar and solar coming into play, setting up those tokens. But it's all very late game central. And if Druid doesn't have enough cards early in the game and he doesn't get the ramp that he needs, I feel like Paladin getting that first day of school is really going to help him and go ahead and kind of win a race that's been thrown. But with these runic carvings, I mean, he burnt a lot of mana getting those down, not only using the overload to go ahead and get to a point where he can use that, but using an extra one just to get those totems rush. I mean, having a consecrating hand, I'm not sure if Aidan's looking too pretty with what he's got going ahead.
Yeah, this deck list very much kind of makes sense until you get up to that 5 mana. If you look at, oh yeah, no, this could be a little bit of an odd token druid, and then all of a sudden it continues the list, and like, I don't know what's going on here anymore. As you said, I don't think it's looking great for Aidan, spending so much mana, spending so much power, so much creation into not that strong of a play. As now there's a 13-12 on the board on the side of Wub. All he can do is overgrowth and pray for later turns, where he does have something that he can create. You're looking at the Ysera, which is currently not in hand, the Cenarian, but still, it's already looking bad.
Ooh, and with another blessing of authority, I mean,
Oh my!
Why did you wait? You could have popped that up front. You just missed a whole 8 damage, Wub. What are you doing? Oh, that could have been chunky, man.
No. Hold up. This Blessing of Authority, it cannot attack heroes this turn if you
Oh, that is correct. I apologize.
Otherwise, I think that card would have been out of the meta instantly because it would have been banned an 8/8 basically.
Yeah, that's
8+8+8. That would have been absolutely ridiculous. It all doesn't matter though. It might as well be because we see this big monster go into the face, and we are not having long games whatsoever. We're having them high flying and direct to the face. Wub just created an absolute monster to gun Aidan down.
Yeah, and that's exactly what this guy's been looking for. He's been getting pummeled constantly by these other decks, and the fact that Priest got banned on Aidan's behalf, I mean, at this point he has nothing but that odd druid to deal with. And going forward, I mean, Wub, everything's just looking better for him. He's gotten what's looked like his toughest deck to get off the board today is finally wiped out. He can continue on to his Incantation of Druid, which we're going to see right here. Then we're also going to be seeing his Priest come into play because, as we know, his Hunter was the one that got banned. So, I mean, going forward, Hunter looks pretty good for what we've seen in terms of lineup for what this Druid's got to throw down. And then when it comes to Priest, I mean, if he gets those right draws up front, I mean, I'm sorry, the Priest is banned, but with this Druid, if he gets the right draws up front, I mean, both of these two decks that he has after this, they're both aggro. So they're very up front. If he can get those right draws and Druid not having exactly too much to deal with those threats and not too much board clear going on, really. I mean, you had the likes of Assault of the Lunar Eclipse, I'll admit, but I mean, that's not going to clear 7 minions by turn 5. You do have that Dreaming Drake, but you have to sit there and get the Corrupt effect on it. Otherwise, it's not going to feel all that useful. So, I mean, things are looking a lot brighter for Wub now this time around.
And the Dreaming Drake is not even going to really matter that much for a Token Druid because it isn't a clear. It blocks the damage, which is what Token Druid is perfectly fine with. They'll just buff up the board consistently, continuously. The Gibberling not actually coming out in the initial turn. I think he has some shenanigans up his sleeve for both those Gibberlings, just creating a massive board. Potentially on turn 4, we can need Power of the Wild into Gibberling or something. Maybe even turn 3, wouldn't surprise me. Having 4 minions on the board at that point, a lot of damage coming in, or not necessarily a lot of damage, but just kind of death by 1,000 needles at that point.
Yeah, I completely agree, especially with the fact that he has such a strong starting hand here. He has all these Gibberlings to play with. He has Tree Forcements right now, Power of the Wild. I mean, he has a really strong setup and has the capability to really snowball at this point in time. And that is if, you know, Aidan doesn't get anything down on the board to deal with this. This is going to possibly end within these next 2 or 3 turns pretty easily.
You know what? You say possibly, I say it's going to end in the next 2 or 3 turns. Sometimes I just like to take a little bit of a gamble. Screw RNG. You know what? We're saying it's going to end, or I'm saying I'll take the full blame if it actually doesn't, because, well, to be fair, you're a lot more rational in that regard to say it could, where, well, Aidan, he doesn't really have a way to deal with this current board coming at him. But then again, on the side of Web, there's not really a lot currently to buff him with. But we all know that there's a lot that he could be drawing.
Well, I mean, to play on the whole deal of, you know, what could happen and what's most likely going to happen, to be completely blunt about it. I mean, as a caster, I mean, you can't blame me for wanting to see something to get excited about. I love for this to turn around and to sit there and run to the back of my room and scream for you guys. But, you know, when it's really looking at this right now, if we're being completely blunt and honest about it, yeah, it's probably not going to be pretty, and it's probably going to end here. And I'm sorry, not probably, going to end in these next couple turns, especially with all these buffs now coming in, having your hero power, having a lightning bloom to deal with next turn with that fungal fortunes. I mean, Wub technically has a lot of stuff to play with, a lot of things to play with in hand overall. And going forward, I mean, Aidan is only sitting at 4 mana crystals. None of his threats are all that big. The best he could do is set up a Dreaming Drake for next turn, but it's going to be over at that point.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I'm sure Wub would have liked one more minion on the board. That Moonfire came in relatively clutch because it just creates a space where Wub can't buff his minions as much. That Gibberling completely taken off as the Dreaming Drake just comes out without the Corrupt. He knows he's in trouble at least a little bit. Might actually go for Fungal Fortunes, looking for some more buffs with that Lightning Bloom in hand instead of opting to play, well, Adorable Infestation when he has 5 mana. I say maybe Fungal Fortune comes out. I don't really know a scenario where it doesn't come out, especially since Aidan is so slow, and well, that is something that Wub should know, that Aidan has an incredibly slow deck.
Yeah, and when you already get one of those Dreaming Drakes onto the board, you know that one of his big taunts and really one of his only ways to deal with stuff is already down, and he didn't even get the Corrupt effect on it. I mean, you're feeling pretty comfy in this situation. I mean, he does have now a Blessing of the Ancients. He can clear out that in one hit, and he can get 9 damage down, putting Aidan down to 10 health overall. And even then, not even having a minion that's really sitting at too terrible of a place and too easy to clear out with something like a Moonlight overall, I mean, that's just super healthy for Wub right now. And I'm sure that he's glad to finally be sitting on a high horse after getting bullied for so many turns and so many games leading up to this point, that he finally knows that maybe Aidan, this was his biggest mistake. Not any card he's played or any kind of draw or, you know, missed damage he's done, but purely bringing in this deck into this matchup or any matchup at that point. I mean, what can you do?
Now you can play 2/3/5s and then still get absolutely clobbered by the Blessing of Ancients coming in. Perfect trade coming in as well. I think that's lethal. I think that's going to... Oh, no, actually, it's going to be slightly off. He's put down to 2 health, but it's all delaying the inevitable. It's all Aidan trying to prove us wrong that we're going to say that we said it was going to end in the next few turns. He's just going to make sure it's like 4 or 5 turns instead of saying, I outlived you guys. I outlived you guys' expectation, which is the only achievement I think at this point that he can actually get.
Yeah, any small little victory counts when you're looking at those records. I mean, even if you don't sit there and win a whole series, which is what we're all really expecting to get when we go into a match, just getting more of your decks and experience, getting them in on the board and into play to see how they compete. I mean, I don't know if exactly this game against Wub and such an influential matchup was the time to pull out this Druid, but besides that, I mean, he's got a Moontouch Amulet now. He's got a lot of armor now, and he finally has a way to clear one of these. But, I mean, Wub, he's just going to have more and more resources to deal with as the course of the game goes on with that other Fungal Fortune hand already. I mean, it's just a lot.
Yeah, it's just still dead. So you can get all the armor you want, and yeah. That is something that Wub was looking at initially as well, looking at, okay, how can I create a lot of pressure? Oh, wait, I have lethal on board. Let me just put that all to face. Yeah, Wub knew what was happening right there, and Aidan couldn't really do too much about it. And we do go to that game 5. Always incredibly exciting. Now, the Priest coming out, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, the Priest versus the Druid. No, actually, is it the Priest?
Yes, sir. They both have a Priest, or no, it's... No, yeah, it is the Priest. It is the Priest.
Okay.
Yeah, all over the place. This whole weird deck got me all thrown out, man. I sat there, we talked about it before the game, and now that's actually on the board is even more confusing to me. So it's all a little fuzzy right now.
Yeah, it was fuzzy, but now that we know the decks, we can actually start talking about this a little bit. The Resurrection Priest. It's going to try and go late game, which I think is something Aidan wants to get to, considering he doesn't have any early game board clears, which we saw in the previous matchup. So Aidan could just be able to show his deck right here and kind of show what it's made of. Still, is it going to be going up against a Resurrect Priest and actually give it a proper fight? I don't really think so.
Yeah, and that's the whole deal that we're really looking at. But, I mean, albeit, Wub does have some pretty solid first draws. He needs to find ways to go ahead and get these resurrection spells into his hand, because when you break it down, he's got great minions in the death pool to set up right here. He has his convincing infiltrator. He has a Kartuk defender. Those are the two main aspects and the two biggest minions you want to go ahead and get down a lot. And then the one trump card that he has for that whole synergy is going to be Archmage Fargoth. So he has three crucial elements of this whole kind of synergy in hand, because I mean, those three cards alone are a lot better to go ahead and put in than your Bone Wraith. So the fact that he already has those in hand, he could sit there and probably look for one of those effects with a Renew, find a way to just stand up and, you know, kind of keep himself together in the meantime. With both of those minions being taunts, he could discover a lot of things from now till whenever Aidan could possibly start throwing threats down on the board.
And this is already not looking good for Aidan. Mainly because we see the hand of Wub, which is exactly what you kind of know from Hearthstone or pretty much any spectating game where you can just see what's going on, whereas the other player can't. So Aidan, he's still going to be playing to the best of his ability and trying to build up a board, as he can play the defenders here, create a little bit of pressure, trying to raise Wub down potentially, knowing that he's not really going to win in that end game. He does know the deck, so he is going to try and play around it, try and finish him off as early as possible. But as soon as there's Kartuk defenders, and as you said, the infiltrators are in the pool, it's just so hard to get through that. One, they're all taunt. Two, they all do things to either healing or your board. So you're not really able to generate anything, not really able to get anything going in this Hysteria. It's going to clear a little bit. Actually, it only clears himself off the board. It's a little bit lucky for Aidan there. That's also part of the game.
Yeah, that whole Hysteria kind of problem now. I mean, there's not much you can do about it, only being able to cast it on enemies, and the fact that you threw that Bone Wraith down, then went with the Hysteria. I mean, super unfortunate overall with how the odds rolled out, but that's part of learning the game and noticing, okay, this is the thing I should do orders and probably to prioritize and consider when throwing these cards down. So at this point, this is where Aidan finally gets a chance to establish his board. He's been sitting there. He's maybe just like Wub's Pure Paladin, third time's the charm. He can find a way to finally finish this out if he gets enough threats and finds a way to get any of these to stick, to just kind of snowball.
Yeah, we do see the Embalming Ritual though, and that could just come down on the Infiltrator having two easy board clears, and as soon as you want to build up your board, having two minions being in the way of that is going to cost you, or well, two minions that you first have to get through, then it also kills two of your own. It's a little bit of a sacrifice. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see that come out. Indeed, the Embalming Ritual clear off a little bit of the pressure, because are there really any other better options? You could play the Kartuk, well, then being on 26 health, you don't get full value, and it's easily get through. So I do think we're going to see that come out, and indeed the Convincing Infiltrator comes out, but Aidan, he's going to create a lot of board pressure here.
Yeah, and this is almost in a sense is starting to look like a higher end Token Druid when you really break it down. Seeing what he was capable of building with the cards he had and how much he got bullied on earlier with his other two matchups, he's finally finding the draws he needs to put himself on this board. And at this point, Wub is really just hoping that this Infiltrator finds the right hits and is minimizing as many targets as possible, because if it clears that 4 and 6-2, which it doesn't end up doing, I mean, those were free attacks that were just kind of, negated. But at this point, I mean, he's a lot happier with the results that happened, but he still has to find a way to maintain and keep himself alive for one more round before he can get that Master Resurrection down, because, I mean, with the way he's sitting right now, this is more than enough for lethal.
Yeah, it is more than enough. We do see that Starfall in the hand that it was able to pick up. So the Kartuk is probably not going to be enough. Healing for 5 damage of the Starfall, clearing that out directly. He's in a bad position right now, and Aidan, the high end, the fancy, the classy Token Druid might just be able to pull through here. The weird deck coming in. Also the Zero play, so even if this board does get cleared, has decks or cards in his deck which just generate cards on the board directly, not able to attack with them necessarily. And indeed, Wub is taking a long, hard think about this, not quite sure what to do. And what do you really blame him? You're up against this board. Yeah, I don't really see a lot of options here.
Yeah, and I'm sure one thing Wub is really wishing for right now, I'm sure he would love to have a Holy Nova in hand and clear 3 of those minions out for free while getting a heal, but that's not exactly an option right now when you have most of your combo pieces set up, but you don't have anything to get them back in when you sit there and they tap out. So overall, in this situation, especially having that Starfall, as you said, I mean, that's going to be heals, but it's seemingly probably not, yeah, it's not going to be enough.
Oh my. We do see it pull through with the hero power. Aidan actually able to bring us to a game 5, and let's just say he's a showman. He wants to do it with a little bit of a fancy deck, and props to him for that. I think, well, it's mainly the draws that were on the board for Aidan there. Having the Arbor up early on together with the Solar Eclipse, which I'm pretty sure he only has 1 copy of as well, of the Solar Eclipse. Now, he does have 2 copies of that Solar Eclipse and also 2 copies of Arbor Up. So in that regard, he does have a lot of power creation if he does end up getting to those turns. The problem for him was getting to those turns, and against a Resurrect Priest, you get that time.
Yeah, and in a series like this, you don't get the benefit of the doubt of, queuing right back up in ladder and hoping you get those draws. You get 3 chances essentially, and if you give up all 3 of those, it's over for you for the day. So, overall, when you're playing with the priest, I'm sure he was super happy up front to get those combo pieces. But when you only get a mass resurrection and you don't have anything else to play with, I mean, there's nothing else you can do in that situation. He did throw out the Infiltrator, he threw out the Kartut, but throwing out that Bone Wraith up front, I mean, that could have messed up his pool. He didn't get the Vargoth down. There's so many things that just came into consideration with that matchup. I mean, it had the potential to snowball and just do extremely well and just completely shut Aidan out, but he never got around to that state, unfortunately.
And that is the thing about slower decks, that you do need to have the ability to go to that late game. He had a Holy Nova to try and clear some of the pressure out. It wasn't in his hand. RNG can sometimes be a cruel mistress. Sometimes it goes in your way. Overall, though, incredibly exciting series. We saw that roller coaster in the games. We saw the roller coaster in the series itself, going 2 for 2, trading blows right there. It has been a phenomenal day of Rocket League thus far, and there's more to come up as well. We've still got 2 more games, 2 more series lined up for you. Obviously, Mick will be there. That's not a surprise anymore. So we will see you back after a little break.
What sound experience would you like today?
I'll have the fantasy pack.
Good choice.
And could you make it a Cloud 2 wireless?
On his way, sir.
Sounds amazing. Wow.
What sound experience would you like today?
I'll have the fantasy pack.
Good choice.
And could you make it a Cloud 2 wireless?
On his way, sir.
Sounds amazing.
Well, welcome back, everybody. I know y'all probably sick and tired of hearing my voice, but just 2 more games and, it'll all be over. But in the meantime, welcome back to Hearthstone. We're on the 3rd match today. And this matchup, we are going to be looking at Limberry, who we've seen a pretty amount of times when it comes to being here on stream. And we're also going to be looking today at Knight as well, which, I personally haven't casted for him before, but all in all, I mean, that just creates a lot of exciting entrances for the league, in my opinion. So overall, though, I am now joined by Coach Jim instead. This is whenever the substitute comes out. So how you doing, Coach Jim?
The substitute. Wow.
Hey, I'm saying like the sub overall. Like he was just getting worn out.
You mean that, they saved the best for last year? That's what you obviously mean, right, Mick?
I mean, we got another game after this, but yeah.
That's what I'm saying. The best for last. The best for last. But no, like you were saying, we've seen Limberry before. Aggressive player. I kind of like to watch it. It makes it more fun to watch. I also have not seen Knight as of yet. But looking at their deck list, I think we might have some aggro v aggro going on here tonight. It's going to be some quick games, I'm thinking, depending on what gets banned out. But I think they could be quick, but they could be fun. There's not going to be a lot of sitting around waiting. We're going to have constant action going on, which for the viewers is probably what everyone's here to see.
Yeah, and really coming down to those huge mulligans right there up front. Either the make it or break it up front. But overall, I mean, it really just comes down to these bans, as you said. When you really break it down, the only real deck that isn't super aggro of any kind of sense is Limberry's, Spirit Warlock. To where you had those soul fragments, you're playing into those, you're trying to get those in your deck as much as possible and you utilize them to the best fashion possible, as well as getting ticketus off, destroying those cards. But I feel like even in a sense, if that doesn't get banned in Limberry, that's against his favor because of the fact of how slow that deck feels. You're waiting for those late games, you're trying to get those big draws in to get those corrupt effects in, and by the time you even get a chance to throw those down, the game is most likely going to be over. And if he's forced to leave this in the game, that's most likely going to play in the Knight's favor if he doesn't get the right draws up front.
To agree with you there. We were talking earlier a little bit that we might see 2 Druid bans. Nobody wanting to see the Druids come out was the other thing we talked about maybe we'd see. Although personally, I would like to see Druid v Druid just to see how many different things they can stack on the board at the same time without crashing the program.
Yeah, Hearthstone, I don't think it's a little too heavy on the Rams. I don't know if we'll see any crashing, but in terms of these decks and how they'll confrontate with each other, I feel like there will be a little bit of crashing and burning in terms of the competition because, I mean, when it comes down to these aggro decks, it really just comes down to those starting pools. And, I mean, if you don't get the right ones off the bat, some of these guys may just consider forfeiting on turn 1 if it really doesn't come in their favor. I mean, that's never suggested, and it's, just an over-dramatization, but I mean, besides the fact when we really break it down, that's all aggro comes down to. And interestingly enough, we're seeing different incantations of these aggro decks. Meanwhile, with Hunter, on Limberry's side, he does have a Hunter deck, but it's not a Highlander Hunter like you usually see. It's not a single kind. He has lots of duplicates within this deck. He utilizes the Toxic Reinforcements, Kobold Sand Troopers, the Leper Gnomes, all kinds of things that get that face damage indirectly through trades, instead of just outright just finding ways to do that damage directly. So we will be actually seeing the bans here in a second, which I can tell you about 3, 2. Knight is getting his Warlock locked out. Actually, no, excuse me. Knight is not getting his Warlock locked out. Knight doesn't have a Warlock.
That's Limberry's Warlock that's being banned.
Yes,
and it looks like
Limberry's Warlock.
Druid. So it looks like
so that's
Warlock and Druid are the bans.
Yeah, so overall, that means actually, this is interesting to see though. So we were kind of half right, talking about how one of the Druids are most likely going to get banned. But interestingly enough, Knight, almost from my point of view, giving himself a disadvantage banning the Warlock. Because as I said, it plays a little bit slower. And when you sit there and allow him to play that slow deck, I mean, just what exactly, if you lock that out, it's almost like he's asking to just get these huge upfront confrontations and just settling with that.
No, 100%. That's what we were talking about. I agree with you there. For some reason, the sound here is so loud, and I don't know why. So that was the bans, though. So now we'll get to see what's going on here, though. But no, I think it's going to be interesting. You know, they got rid of the slow play deck, so like we thought, we were going to see all of the aggro all the time. One of them will have a druid deck, so we will get to see stacked minions on top of stacked minions on top of stacked minions. At least if the deck plays well, we will. But otherwise, I mean, we could go, if it goes 3-0, we could be out of here in about 15 minutes.
That's probably what it's going to come down to if any of these guys have Lady Luck on their side today. But I mean, when you really break it down, the first matchup we're seeing is Knight running his Incantation of Rogue. It's not exactly a huge, it's a self-sharpening rogue, so it's very weapon central. It's all about getting those first couple plays and getting that self-sharpening sword, finding ways to ramp that up, and eventually just snowball with those. Actually, never mind, he's not running the sword shapers. Okay, so purely just running weapons here, actually. Overall, instead of going for a way to where he can generate minions with the weapons he's getting with the Steel Dancers, Limberry is running Steel Dancers within his deck, but Knight is not. So this is purely not even worrying about minion control at all. We see every single one of the cards in his hand so far only has to do with spells, buffing his weapon, or doing something involving weapons. So the fact that he has such a strong start with the stealth minion to open up with that, he has a nitro boost, which he could possibly buff coming up right here. I mean, but he's going to open up with the self-sharpening instead, which is a great play by him because of how it just scales so quickly. I mean, if Druid doesn't get any minions down here pretty soon, which is not looking like he's got too much to deal with besides bees, Limberry's going to be in some pretty quick trouble right here.
Limberry is going to be in some trouble. However, if they do get some of what they need, everything in their hand right now is set up just for them to combo everything they need onto the field.
Mm-hmm. I do agree with that. With the he's going with Power of the Wild right here. Interestingly enough, opting for that instead of the bees. I personally probably would have gone with the bees, open that up to go with the 2 innovates, and then utilize that Power of the Wild to buff those 3 remaining into 2/2 versions instead of those 1/1s. Because I mean, Rogue right here, this is what he's going to do. He's going to burst you down because he's not worried about the minions on the board whatsoever. He doesn't care about what you have on board. He's going to just utilize the cards in hand to go face. And we see the only remaining damage he has right now is just another 7 damage on top of what he has. He's sitting at 15 right now, and that's not lethal overall unless he can get that eviscerate off. And Druid, if he does not find a way to heal himself up a little bit, it's actually lethal.
This could get really interesting, though, with the solar eclipse and the bees. Mm-hmm. This could get really interesting. Oh wait, oh man, this could get dirty. It depends on the top deck. Depending on what can get top decked right here, this could get super dirty.
It really comes down to that. You have to establish this board, and Limberry has to finish this game right here. Otherwise, with that self-sharpening sword, that is more than enough damage to finish this man right here and right now. Goodness gracious, dude!
Didn't get it.
That was probably the fastest collision I've ever witnessed.
You know, it all came down to the top deck. Like, if he top decked what he needed, like, he got bees down. Let's be honest. Like, he got what he wanted out of bees. Absolutely what he wanted. So, our producer said something. Do we not have to leave spectator mode? We can just sit here and wait for that error to go away there, Caleb? And my producer has left us. Well, Caleb leaving his post, nothing new, but it does look like we'll just be able to sit here. So, which is nice. All right, so Limberry going back to the Druid.
Yeah, I feel like when you're dealing with this token Druid, a lot of the times people, once you get into a state, unless you have a slower case kind of deck, it's usually going to be immediately followed up by token Druid to see if you can go ahead and get it out of the way. And that's usually what I can advise when you're playing these aggro decks, is when it's so kind of reliant on those first couple draws and trying to establish yourself up front. I mean, the more you play it, the more chances you get to get the exact draws you need. Now, what I will say is it's interesting the version of Demon Hunter that Knight's running right now, because I personally have never seen Felfire Deadeye within a Demon Hunter deck so far. He's running a lot of low-cost minions, so it's a very traditional kind of style of Demon Hunter compared to the likes of, say, Soul Fragment Demon Hunter, to where you're running more larger minions to help with that board control late game instead of finding those traits to establish in the early stages.
You know, I'm a little bit confused here as to why he didn't combo this off on the first turn. He had the ability to do it, and he didn't play it on turn 1, and I don't know why. With the Lightning Bloom there, he could have comboed that turn 1, right?
Yeah, he could have, but that also would have really burnt out his hand, because going forward, I'm sure in the shoes of Limberry, when you only have a Glowfly Swarm left and that sits there and makes a 2/2 based off each individual spell that you have in hand, he's not going to get that much value out of it. So, I mean, personally, I wouldn't have comboed anything. I wouldn't have played anything at all, and hopefully utilize that Lightning Bloom in order to get that Glowfly Swarm off first before even utilizing the Gibberlings or the Crystal Dryads.
Looking at that, you're playing Token Druid, you need to have board control. And if you don't play anything on your first turn, you're basically ceding board control over to your opponent.
Yeah, that's a very interesting way to look at it, especially, but when these guys know what kind of matchups they're running into, when you're facing the likes of a Demon Hunter, they're probably not going to put that much establishment on the board either. So I think it was a gamble that was willing to be took, but what just wasn't executed. So Limberry obviously has some kind of plan in mind here, because, I mean, he's in the shoes of the player. He's gotten to the position he has so far, and we've seen him compete. He knows what he's doing, but so far, it's just a shame that he's utilized so much materials right up front, didn't get enough on the board to exactly deal with everything and get those trades out and still have any minions standing, because now has a Soul of the Forest in hand, and the only real thing he can play it off of right now would be Dreamway Guardians, because Glowfly Swarm would just use a little bit too much from him.
I think, obviously you're the expert. I'm not the expert here. I'm just looking at it that I think it would have played completely differently had he comboed it turn 1 instead of turn 2. The way the deck has played, the way that the draws have come, I don't think they'd be this deep in the hole right now. But correct me if I'm wrong.
I feel in a sense there's many ways to look at it, because when you're playing with card games, I mean, obviously you've had plenty of experience. Like, there's plenty of different ways you can play a hand, and when you're facing somebody and knowing what kind of deck they're going to be running, you have to consider not only the matchup you're going into and whether or not you played this before, but what exactly draws have already come into play and how their turn 1 looks. Because when you're facing the likes of a Demon Hunter, what they play on turn 1 is a huge tell of what they're going to be trying to go for there in the future. And with, not exactly playing too much, Token Druid in a sense is very weird, where it's sitting in a middle spot. It's not exactly utilizing everything until you get those combo pieces. And with him not really having any buffs and using that Call of the Wild to instead summon a wolf instead of getting those buffs off, that's what's more confusing to me than anything right now.
I have to agree with you there, although it was a good play there on the Glowfly, getting some board presence back. So, like I said, I'm not the expert. They could throw the hashtag up there, hashtag Coach Jim is wrong. Maybe I'm just dead wrong about what was going on there. It just looked very, very weird in my eyes. Yeah.
And in this case now, he is, regardless of where he stood in the early game, he's now actually having some combo pieces here. He finally has something to throw on top of it. Interestingly enough, going for the bees and finding ways to trade into all these minions. But now in this case, you're going to have these Glowflies trading in, trying to clear out this board as much as possible. I mean, if Demon Hunter pulls anything right now that could really benefit this guy and just get any kind of board clears or just any negation of minions on the board at all, that would be huge for Knight, because when you see that Spirit of the Forest, he has 4 minions remaining with him attacking into one of those Glowflies, and then he's going to have 4 2/2 treants on top of that, and now he also has a Fungal Fortune to sit there and refresh his hand and give him more to work with.
Nothing wrong with that. Ooh. Interesting.
Oh man, that's a sinker. When you get that gibberling, you run so many spells and you somehow still end up drawing a minion to discard. That's not fun.
Could get interesting here, though.
And look at this hand. Kane not exactly being too influential. You do get a trade, you get a complete minion wipe off of that, but with him opting for face in this, I think Demon, this looks like a face race at this point with how he's trying to play this out. I understand you had the lifesteal to buff out maybe 2 of those minions, but with Limberry drawing a Power of the Wild right here, I mean, your race just got a little bit slower on your behalf, buddy, especially with the fact he has that Solar Eclipse to double up those buffs. You're going to be using either those minions you just put on board to trade out, or you're going to be using them to try and beat him in his own game. And for the options that's laid out for him right now, Knight has 10 damage available to him, 14 if you include both those twin slices. But with the Il'gynoth, I think he may actually have lethal.
Gonna be interesting, that's for sure. Top decking, Limberry top decked exactly what they needed to get them close, but it's all gonna depend on what Knight can do on his side of the board.
Oh, he definitely has lethal. Oh, he's definitely got it. Now he's got 9. You 8 with that lifesteal combined with the doubling of the damage from Il'gynoth. This dude's got a full OTK in his hand right now.
There it is.
Good night is what Knight is saying right now. That's probably his trademark, because this man is ending these games super quickly. I mean, both games, he has not even gotten around to getting to round 10 and he's already into the game. Even on that Rogue match, he ended at about turn 6. This one he ended about turn 7 or 8. I mean, Knight just coming in with just like a storm.
Now, if you're Limberry right now, do you double back down on the Druid, or do you play something else?
I mean, at this point, when you don't have much left to work with, I feel like Druid is what you would usually opt for if you haven't gotten the draws so far. And knowing that you're going to be running into a Hunter who's going to be a little bit more slower and getting only about 1 or 2 things down per turn compared to the likes of a Demon Hunter who has a lot of combo pieces and doesn't burn his hand out as quickly with that School of Gul'dan, you probably had a much better chance with the Druid overall. But with him running the Hunter mirror matchup, I mean, even if this is Limberry's last game today against Knight, I mean, just seeing a mirror matchup overall is a lot more fun than seeing Token Druid after we just saw it for 2 matches in a row. And especially with Knight opening up with the Zephyrus and having that already in hand and a Daimo Tamer brand. He's got a lot to work with to really make this interesting.
So here we go. Both of them have interesting starts here. You know, we're gonna see hero abilities getting used here. So it's gonna get real interesting really fast.
Yeah, and this toxic reinforcement for Limberry is actually huge right now. That's going to give him a little bit of board control. He's not going to be able exactly to get it off before that imprisoned Felmaw comes up, which would be really nice to give it some other targets to trade out. But that is a really good utilization. That card is super good when you sit there and consider how much value you can get out of it. When you get 6 damage off from your hero power, then you're allowing those 3 leopard gnomes to come down, which is 3 more minions on the board. If you don't clear out, could theoretically give you as much damage as they stay alive. And when they die, they also as well do a damage to the enemy hero, or 2 damage at that, allowing for another 6 guaranteed. So with how the Felmaw was, you know, a strong turn 2, I mean, you may want to wait on Zephyrus for those leopard gnomes to come out if you're in the shoes of Knight right now.
I don't disagree. That's a fact. It's going to be interesting to see what they play here at this point. There we go.
Throwing down a court tour guide here.
All right.
Getting some trades on the minions, slowing down the board. I can understand that. Issue is, you had that Felmaw sitting there, and that's an easy trade right there for Limberry. I mean, that's when you're looking at a 1-1 facing up against the likes of a 5-1, I mean, that seems like an easy trade overall to get so much value out of that. Knock him down from 8 damage return to 3. But, I mean, you have to consider that explosive trap, and I feel like Knight just read into that, knowing exactly what's going to be coming up for him, because that explosive trap could wipe out his whole entire board. But getting that flare, it's exactly what the man needed to give himself a little hand refresh and to keep that Felma on the board. And now, at this point, besides Unleash the Hounds, that's his only real way to trade out this board, and that wouldn't clear the Zephyrs. It wouldn't clear the Intrepid Initiate. This is looking like a pretty good turnout and turnaround for Knight right now.
Right there. It got super interesting when he got rid of the secrets. Super interesting.
Now remaining though, Knight does have a 4 or 5 phase stalker in hand. So with Limberry not having any minions on board to get the full 5 damage out of that kill command right now, really Knight, the only thing he's looking at right now is finding a way to slow Limberry down. He lost the race in the front end. He didn't get as much value out with, you know, slacking on the reinforcements. He did sit there and establish more of a board, but when you throw out that Unleash the Hounds, we just saw it was such an easy clear for Limberry to go ahead and take everything out. And even on top of that, he got 3 Leper Gnomes with that quest that he had thrown down. So overall, getting this taunt right here is a really good play for him. It's going to have to be an exact trade, or he's going to have to run this kill command to trade it out and, you know, not necessarily get that Face Stalker to death, but find it into a position where he can at least do some damage to it. Because otherwise, I mean, that's exactly how he's winning this right now, is through the utilization of all this extra damage he has from other sources and having another toxic reinforcements. I mean, overall, I mean, opening the cages, it's great for Knight, but that one minion doesn't exactly trade off all that well, depending on which one you get.
I agree. I agree. All right. So
Especially
getting some of the board
Dragon Bane
position gone.
If this wipes out the Face Stalker, this is huge. And it hits the 1-1. Man, you got 3 targets there and you get unlucky and hit the one that you want the least to hit. Well, yeah. I mean, that's Hearthstone for you. But overall, it is going to look like Knight's going to have a pretty good draw here in terms of minions. Because on top of the Wriggling Horde that he just pulled, he now has a 5/6. He has a 5/3. Limberry has no minions on board really to get the full value out of that kill command. I mean, he has theoretically, you look at it, he has 2 damage from his hero power, 3 from the weapon. He's got 8 damage, but Knight has 9 health. So this is cutting it really, really close here. And with that Dino Tamer brand, I gotta say, it's looking like Knight's closing this out right now.
Yeah, that did not go the way Limberry needed it to. The top deck there didn't quite hit what he needed.
Because when you look at the 5 damage, the fact he's not trading out that Huffer, what can you do? I mean, you can take the hit, or if trading it out, but you still got that 2 damage combined with the hero power, combined with Dino Tamer brand. I mean, it's just too much at that point. So it's looking like Knight's going to close it out here in what has been probably the fastest series I have ever witnessed in Collegiate Hearthstone. Or Hearthstone, period.
You know, oh, there it is. So no, what I said about 15 minutes, right? That's what I said?
Yeah, we ended up, what? I didn't have a timer on hand.
I think we're right there about 15 minutes. I think we're right there.
Dude. 20.
20 minutes, okay.
Oh my
including
goodness,
the what? Our producer's back, including the what, Caleb? Including the bad game, 20 minutes. Right on top of it. Man, wow. Can I call him or can I call him? So Knight in very fast fashion taking that one. But, you know, I kind of feel bad. Like, Limberry didn't play poorly. They just didn't get in their hand the cards they needed. And, you know, with a collectible card game like this, sometimes it comes down to the RNG. Sometimes the RNG is not with you. Sometimes your opponent gets exactly what they need at the top of their deck. And sometimes you're sitting there praying that you get what you need and it just never shows up.
Yeah, it's just that's tough, man. At that point, that's so annoying to face. If I'm putting myself in the shoes of Limberry, it felt like he didn't even get to play the game until it came to that token druid, and then he just got traded out right there by a demon hunter. So I mean, just it felt like he got bullied at every turn today in this series, and I got my condolences to the man for that, but also my congratulations to Knight for coming in here and saying good night, because that was insane. That was he just sat there and showed all other versions of aggro that have been put into the meta so far are slow compared to the version of aggro that he brings to the table.
Oh yeah, just a whole different. I don't want to say a whole different style, but just got everything they needed. Just everything they possibly wanted, they had waiting for them. They ordered it up that way. Their Uber Eats driver got there on time. Just everything, absolutely everything they wanted.
I mean, just looking at this deck, this road deck specifically, I'll be honest, just seeing that it was only based off weapons and not too much off minions, I didn't think it'd get enough establishment on board up front. But pulling both those nitro boost poisons right off the bat, as well as getting a self-sharpening sword so early, I feel like if he pulled anything else besides that, he wouldn't have had as much influence. I mean, those two nitro boosts right there, that was a combination of of 8 extra damage right there on top of the, what is it, with the self-sharpening sword you have 1. So that's about, I mean, turning 4 damage into 12 right there in 1 turn, and then just having a weapon that scales off of that. If that man had pulled anything else, I don't think it would have turned out like that. But that draw right there up front to get that self-sharpening sword, along with a single spy mistress to get those nitro boost poisons, triggered onto, is just insanely influential. And the fact that he didn't clear it out in that second matchup to sit there and find a way in that first game with the token druid to lock it out, get those bees on it, and not let those nitro boosts come in. I mean, these guys see their deck list, and I don't understand what the thought process was behind that.
I couldn't tell you. It almost happened too fast. If you blinked, you missed it, folks. If you blinked, you missed one of those rounds. I'm just saying.
You missed the first one.
They did not take a lot of time. Definitely not round 1. I think are we gonna cut it there and then wait for 7 o'clock to start up the next one there, Mick?
I couldn't tell you. I'm not on that behalf of production. I'm just here to talk about the game laid out in front of us. But it is you and I. So that's a really good question to actually have answered, because I mean, with how quick that went, I mean, it really just comes down to the player schedule at this point, because I'm sure none of them expected it to go that quick either.
Well, and I'm just wondering, because it's not like they were really long matches that we have a lot to talk about. We could talk about each individual round back and forth, and we'd still get done talking about it before the next match was supposed to start.
I completely agree.
So I'm just waiting to hear from our producer if we're going to be cutting it here and taking a little bit of a break before the final match of the night. Well, that's not going to happen, Caleb. So
you don't want to 1v1 me, Coach Jim?
Our producer is suggesting that we 1v1 while we're waiting here. I mean, if somebody wants to see a game quicker than what we just witnessed, I guess we could. But it would absolutely be quicker than what we
I've
just
only spent about $800 on the game. I don't have that many cards.
0. I have spent nothing. Which means one of two things will happen. It'll be over in about 2 minutes, or I will have bragging rights for the rest of my life that I took the baseline deck you get when you start the game and somehow beat Mick the Mighty.
You're not a gambling man? You're not up for that kind of bet?
Oh, no. I
get it. It's okay, man.
I'm definitely a gambling man, just not quite on that one. I mean, if we could find some way of bringing up a chessboard, I'd be willing to take you in a chess match. But yeah, I don't know.
I don't know if we have a league for that. I don't think people came along for that one.
I don't know. We might get some people who want to watch that one. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff we could do, just not a lot of stuff that I'm good at. As I've mentioned before, my game has since come and gone because, as I like to say, and as people like to remind me, I am old. And 1997 was when my game of choice came out, the StarCraft Brood War. So.
StarCraft. That's an interesting
StarCraft
one.
Brood War, specifically Brood War. Gotta have my Dark Templar. Gotta have my Protoss Dark Templar.
Interesting. I've never played StarCraft. I've sat there and seen it in this Blizzard store, and I'm like, it's free. I could give it a shot. But I don't know if I can stoop that low, man. It's like Halo Wars in a sense, because I started on console, so that's what I knew for the most part was Halo Wars. It just seemed way too tactical. Like I can sit there, I can be a leader, but I can't be a dictator. I'm not going to lead an army by any means.
You see, back in the day, RTS was the only way to go. Back in the day, it was all about the RTS. Nowadays, RTS is almost dead. You hardly see RTS anywhere anymore.
There's a good one I actually did play. Have you ever played Northgard before?
I have not.
It's like a very it's a like a Viking era RTS. It's a lot slower, I will say, in a sense, because you're not like in a competitive format where you're racing against people and like trying to overwhelm them. But there's like a story and things to it. I mean, I played and I genuinely enjoyed it. It was my only really time I dabbled in RTSs, but I kind of genuinely enjoyed it with the way the art style and everything was laid out.
Now, to be fair, some of the best story plot ever is in StarCraft and StarCraft Brood War. I'm just letting you know. That's from back in the day when there was mainly single player. Multiplayer was a whole new thing. So the single player had to be massively good. And some of the best storylines, some of the best betrayals, some of the best twists and turns come from StarCraft and StarCraft Brood War. I'm just saying, I am a little bit biased, but I am saying that's the way it goes. Hashtag not the Queen of Blades, hashtag Sarah Kerrigan. So if anybody gets that one, feel free to throw that in the chat, and I'd talk about that one forever. But no, these days I'm more into the grand strategy games there. Mick, what about you?
I gotta say, I love strategy games overall. I love using brains. That's exactly why I love seeing these. That's why I love seeing longer matchups when it comes to Hearthstone, because of the fact it's not purely relying on luck. When you sit there and both decks have an opportunity to elaborate to those later rounds, you sit there, you finally get a chance to see all these big cards come into play. You finally get to see players learn and adapt on how to allocate their mana, on how to play the game, on how to, kind of circumnavigate around what they're dealt with to create the most influential board possible. Compared to that upfront, do I get lucky? Do I get the perfect curve right now? And can I end the game in 3 turns? And that's what I love about it. It's like with chess. Like, say if you had an opener in chess to where you can just right up front, you're only playing with 2 queens. It's like it just comes down to whoever has the first turn at that point.
To a point, yes. I'm right there with you. I do, even when I play card games, I always played that the more control-oriented style. Magic the Gathering comes to mind. Blue-black were my favorite color combination. Unless, of course, it was Ravnica playing the Church of Deals with a little bit of Orzhov action. Everybody loves white-black. So much removal in white-black. I don't need you to stop you from playing your spells or your creatures. I just need to get them off the board later.
Yeah.
Steal my health back directly from you. Vampires all the way. But so I'm with it there. The control style, the more strategic style, tactical style, having the maximum hand size, just waiting for your opponent to make the mistakes, and then just, finding a way of playing everything you need to all at one time while they sit there and cry about it. Nothing better than that. Nothing better than that at all. Why don't we go ahead and take a break, though, here, Mick? We got about 15 minutes till 7 o'clock, so give our producer time to get everything prepared for the 7 o'clock match. Hopefully, that one takes a little bit longer than this one. Give us a little bit more to talk about here on a Friday night. So, Mr. Producer,
with that one being the last, I don't think it will matter at that point. But I mean, when we're in a little area of limbo right here, this is where it gets a little weird. So I feel like next game, if it's just as quick, we wouldn't have any complaints. But this time around, I mean, goodness, he just swept the rug out from under him.
Absolutely. Mr. Producer, why don't you go ahead and take us to a commercial break? Nobody go anywhere. We'll be back at 7 o'clock with our last match of the night.
What sound experience would you like today?
I'll have the fantasy pack.
Good choice.
And could you make it a Cloud 2 wireless?
On his way, sir.
Sounds amazing.